What is up, grinders? Welcome back to another episode of the MMA Crunch Time. Before lock here on a UFC 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A little odd time, John. They're switching things up on us all the time, but another 11 fight card. I will say, last week, we knew it was going to be a crazy card, just like this one's going to be, but that main event stack and a loser in somewhat of an optimal lineup. How the hell did that happen?
Yeah. I mean, last week was crazy. I always say that we've got 11 on this card, right? We've got 11 fights, and it looks differently. It's going to look differently at the end than when we're looking at it right now, right? Like fighters like Marina Rodriguez look tempting now because she's got a big line in her favor. But at the end of the night, we're going to have 11 winners. So what 11 winners do you want to have at the end of the night? And then like fighters that are maybe going to be low scoring but have great odds to win aren't as appealing. Last week kind of broke that mold because we had 11 fights. We didn't have 11 winners. We didn't even have 9 winners. I don't even know how many people won their fight because we had 1 no contest and 1 draw. So yeah, tricky math, but yeah, on to another week. This card maybe doesn't have the talent that last week's card had, and last week I think we were talking about was even a little questionable.
Yeah, I mean, you can't even stack the main event in this one. That's how crazy it is. You could rationalize 5 rounds of striking. This one, you have somebody that could blank it. You could have an early knockout. It's almost like I'd rather stack one of the other 3 rounds. Remember when Nerdy Tenor won? What was it, 3-4 weeks ago? I could see something crazy like that happening because you have to get unique. And if favorites win out like they have been, we're in trouble from fantasy wise.
Yeah, but it's not always going to happen, and it's a rainy day up and down the East Coast. So actually, I kind of like the 4:00 start time. It's just made my pumpkin beer run for the fall. So just kind of settle in on the couch and watch some UFC.
I love it. Yeah, no, I think this slate has ugly up and down. The first 2 fights of the night are some of the ugliest MMA I've seen and ugliest scoring potential. Because that's kind of my starting point, I would say, on this card, because I could see one of the 2 ladies in the first 2 fights being super low owned and scoring a zillion points. I think organically people are going to gravitate towards a Tamaris Vidal type of play because she's got that knockout in that first fight. But then that second fight there, Inoue and Goldie, these 2 I'm crossing off and praying nothing happens, but it's such a small slate, John. It's ugly. The ownership play is there if you want to play one of these. That's essentially what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so it is. It's an odd situation. The first 2 fights, like you guys call it ugly women's MMA, and it's such the fights are so similar. It's hard to even differentiate because they're next to each other in the salary structure. Both fighters, both favorites have about a 70% chance to win. Underdogs then about 30%. Both favorites have about a 15% chance of a first round finish. Both underdogs then about 5%. It's one of these fights could be relevant, but it's also possible that neither of them is. I tend to go, and this is actually a little bit of a difference from what I put in the expert survey, but I'm going a little bit more towards Mizuki rather than Vidal. I think ownership, and also I think Vidal's opponent, Montserrat Rendon, I think is maybe a little bit better, and whereas Hannah Goldie, just in terms of the narrative, is maybe 1 foot out of the UFC.
You mean an OnlyFans girl, perhaps, is the narrative you're saying, and the OnlyFans girl is having an 0-3 record over the last 6 months. I'm just throwing it out there that 1 foot out the door is definitely a narrative.
Yeah, maybe some different career aspirations. Maybe not focusing as much on the UFC as she should, which actually may come into one of the later fights we discuss when we talk about distractions. But yeah, so I kind of lean towards Mizuki rather than Vidal, but it's pretty close. I think I am going to end up being over the field on what I assume is going to be low ownership on Mizuki, and probably right at or under the field on Vidal.
Yeah, and really, to be honest, none of these ladies really grapple. I think a lot of the women's fights are due one of the fights is going to have like 200 significant strikes. You know it, John. I know it. There's these phantom strikes that they end up giving. And organically, I think it leads me to like a Marina Rodriguez type that should have 1,000,000 strikes. But that one, even Michelle Watterson's got to get a win. Both these ladies need to get a win. There's like pink slip fights up and down.
Yeah.
I mean, Watterson grappling. I mean, she's taken down her opponents in the last few fights. That's somewhat interesting.
Actually, Watterson is probably a play that I'm going to own just as much as I own Vidal and Mizuki, just because like Watterson's maybe a little bit more of a like professional fighter. She's put up 100-point wins in the UFC before, a couple of them. So yeah, and it's obviously just a price thing as well. I mean, I think we've kind of talked about it before, where some of the some of the fights that are projected to go the distance, like the underdog at under 7,000 on smaller cards with some outsized lines. Like if we don't have a bunch of underdogs winning, then like does Michelle Watterson Gomez land on the winning lineup?
It goes. I think her value on the slate exponentially goes up because of the condensed form of this slate and the ability that this is. It's got to be what -400 to go to a decision at this stage. I haven't opened it up, but she's got a great floor. She's got a path to hold her against the cage, pitter patter, significant strikes for days. She's been durable. It's not like Marina Rodriguez is going out there and knocking every lady out. It's not a Tamaris Valdal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, just look, fight go to the distance, between -300 and -380, which is actually a pretty big spread. I mean, definitely favored to go the distance, and like sometimes like you want those points at the bottom, right? You want those points at the bottom of your lineup, and those can help you because like there's going to be some fighters that we think have a better shot at winning than Watterson Gomez, but in a loss they're going to put up like a point or two, whereas if Watterson Gomez is getting like 50 points in a loss, like that can start to add up. Not just for min cashes, but in a few times a year, right? You end up with that losing fighter on a win lineup.
Absolutely, and I think that you're thinking the same thing I am. That middle range, there's a lack of a middle range. There's no 82, there's no 8,100 fight. So you're really looking at this condensed ownership towards the main event. And then that people are going towards the heavyweight boys. And then there's this weird fight. I think the fight that in the middle, Ricardo Ramos and Jourdain, how the hell are you handling this one? Because high action fight, I will say that. They're somewhat like last week we had a fight in the mid range where it was, if it goes to a decision, there's probably not a ton of fantasy output, but these guys could put up a ton of fantasy points over 3 rounds, and their price is everything, man. They're right there to be had.
Yeah, it's tough to avoid this fight. I think I have both fighters owned about equally, so I think I'm a little over the field on Ramos, a little bit. No, probably right at or just under the field on Jourdain. I'm seeing Jourdain land in a lot of lineups. So that's the FanDuel ownership. I think I'm under the field on Jourdain. This should be an action one. Like I prefer this. I prefer these fighters like to the female fighters, right? Like I see these guys putting up points in a win or a loss. It's not necessarily going to be a fight that definitely sees a finish. But actually, I like that, right? Like these are guys that could potentially score, more than 30 points a round that you lose, right, from going from the first round to the second round finish or second round to the third round finish.
Yeah, I like that too. And I feel like Ramos has more tools to win this fight. He can hold him against the cage. He can go for takedowns. There's a couple of fights on this slate where you and I will probably agree on that the action is based on the grappling side of the fighter, and it forces the other side into some scoring opportunities. And that pivot brings me to Bryce Mitchell. I mean, it has to. He's got a lot of outside forces. You mentioned it. Dan Ige is contagious. He doesn't score fantasy relevant. He's nothing, but he's gonna have to score well with Bryce Mitchell going for takedowns. And Mitchell just doesn't have any striking. I think people think he's got some type of striking. I think he's outgunned on the feet, maybe not by a mile, but Dan Ige could score a hell of a lot of points here because of Bryce Mitchell coming forward.
Exactly, and I tagged Ige there. I think I'm over the field on Ige, under the field on Mitchell. I wonder if some people are just kind of playing or betting Bryce Mitchell based on name value. he seems to have a ton of distractions going on, and that seems difficult to fight with. It seems difficult to like prepare for a fight with. Whereas, I can see Ige maybe being a little more professional about his preparation leading into this fight. But Ige is the underdog, right? The thing
Did
that
you see his video he came out with? So he's been managing fighters for like the last 3 to 4 years. And I really think he was with Ali, one of the best promoters, and he was starting to manage guys. And that's what his backup plan was. But he came out with a video and he said, I'm stopping managing fighters. I'm focusing on my prime years of my career. He's saying the right things. So to back it up, I do agree with you. He's turning things around and saying, I'm going to focus on my career. The things you want to hear.
Yeah, but like the line hasn't reflected that, which gives me some concern. But then you think, oh, maybe people are betting like, people are seeing these crazy Bryce Mitchell videos about his apple trees and gravity not being real and like the conspiracies, yada yada. And it's this guy seems fun. I'm going to bet on him. I don't know. I'm over the field on Ige. And
Yeah,
the volume is a concern. Like Bryce Mitchell's going to score better, but Mitchell's also more expensive. So does Dan Ige at $12 on FanDuel, $7,400 on DraftKings? How much does he have to do to get there on a winning line?
you talk about FanDuel, and I like a number. I like a split decision in that one. And if I'm going to use a free bet, it's probably due to the sponsor of this show, FanDuel Sportsbook. Get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. We don't have to use our bonus bets crazy, but I like a split decision in that fight. I mean, I don't know about you, but we've seen it time and time again. What did we see last week? We saw the draw. That was a split draw, if I'm not mistaken, because you have takedowns and then they don't know how to do the damage. So I could see, Bryce Mitchell bleeding everywhere. Maybe he gets control time. I like a split decision in that fight. Just don't be a draw.
Yeah, sure. I think that's definitely a great use of a free bet. Where it's
Upside.
definitely plausible, right? Like we don't know, and like depending on I don't know what like number you're getting, but yeah, I could see this. I think it's likely to go to decision. I like Ige maybe a little more than Mitchell.
Yeah, me too. Ige split decision was like 12-1. I'm just saying. We move on to the highest priced guy on the slate. This is make it or break it territory, and the year is 2023, and we are putting real life money, not Monopoly money, on Jacob Malkoun. It's terrifying. It's one of the most scary chalk plays I've seen in a very long time, John. And his Achilles heel seems to be power strikers. It doesn't seem like Cody Brundage is a power striker, like in the first round, going to go out there and knock him out. Does he have the path? Absolutely. But Malkoun is just a fantasy machine, man. He gets you down. He'll hold you. He'll do our pitter patter. He's our fantasy. He might be better than Marab. I'm joking, of course, but
right. Well,
he does what we want.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think we put it in the expert survey. 7.5 takedowns per fight over the past 4 fights. Like that's what it's like. Yeah, DraftKings magic. The good news is if you want to hedge, it doesn't take much to be over the field on Cody Brundage. But yeah, this is I think Brundage is a late replacement here. I think up until about a month ago, Malkoun was supposed to fight like Kizriev, Dagestani guy.
Brundage was basically cut. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and like so Malkoun was going to be an underdog in that fight, and then his opponent pulled out, and this screams like they needed somebody that was like had just come off of a fight but like wasn't too damaged. They knew could make weight, and like Cody Brundage is probably like happy to get the one more fight. I don't see it going well for him, but you never know. And I do think he's like his chances of winning in the first round are almost equal to his chances of winning the fight, which you very rarely see. Like that's something to consider. And I'm going to be over the field on Brundage, but I'm going to aim to be over the field on Malkoun as well. Malkoun scores incredibly well in his victories. So we actually so he's got so many paths, right? Like a 3-round decision win, even at the highest price on the card, probably puts Malkoun on the winning lineup. A first round win probably puts him on the winning lineup.
Second round. Don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. There's some scenarios like, so maybe Brundage looks a little bit better, Malkoun looks a little bit worse than we thought, where maybe Brundage is getting the second round, like he blankets him for the second round, right? We see that with grapplers. One guy's on top of the first round, other guy's on top of the second round, then it's a third round. They're both kind of tired and exhausted, and it just doesn't score well. So I think Malkoun's got about an 85% chance of winning this fight. Maybe there is about a 20% chance that it's low scoring, doesn't hit the doesn't hit the winning lineup. I actually think he might be under-owned at that 55% we're showing there.
I love that because I've been trying to not overlook spots lately, right? Like I've done this before where I'm saying, hey, all the metrics are saying he's going to smash. Don't just sell it and be like, whatever, because he's the best play by a mile. I mean, it sucks that he's so expensive, but there's not that type of mold on this slate. I mean, there's another guy that's go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think I have more lineups with Brundage in them than I do that don't have Malkoun or Brundage.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I just don't think you can fade it and have any sense of confidence because once his fight comes up and he lays 130, you're going to go, what the hell did I do? There's another guy that's going to be very, very popular for grappling chops. It's Dan Argueta, man. This guy has a ton of hype behind him, I think. Fantasy-wise, he was going to score over 110 last time. I don't know if you remember. We got screwed out of it if you had that side against Ronnie Lawrence. But, he has the power grappling. I think it really is. Miles Johns is another one of these guys that just doesn't score well over long term. He's going to have another guy, though, that's in his face with Dan Argueta. This is a tricky fight because I can see this thing going overlooked. When you're building lineups, you're going to be following towards the heavyweight fight we'll talk about in a few minutes, the main event. It's a weird range, right? 86, 8,700. These two guys battle. I'm going to group Battle in there as well. How are you handling these two, the Battle and Argueta? Because Battle, I guess, has Fletcher, who continually puts up 40 points but doesn't win fights, John. He's a fantasy scorer.
Yeah, I think I've got Battle owned as one of the highest owned guys on my my 150 lineup pool. I like Argueta probably right around the ownership that we're showing there. Miles Johns doesn't score well, so I've got him as one of my lowest owned fighters. I'd rather take some shots on Michelle Waterson Gomez and maybe spend up somewhere else than play Miles Johns because he's probably not going to win the fight, and even if he wins the fight, he probably doesn't score that well. So I'd rather play Waterson Gomez and take 700 and spend up somewhere.
I don't even know how he wins the fight necessarily. Maybe a striking bait. He's got to stop these takedowns. Argueta's been proving that he wants to get it to the mat and bully you down there. So, I mean, I feel like the scoring would be there for Johns. I just don't see him as a commodity. He doesn't even do the pitter patter. He's just happy to get position if he does. And he's going to be fighting for it.
Yeah. So guys that consistently don't score well, just don't have an interest in. Argueta did look a little bit drained on the scales. I don't really know what to look for there. Just reading the comments right on Twitter and and seeing YouTube and people saying, oh wow, he looks drained. But I think as long as he rehydrates, okay, it's maybe not that much of a concern.
Yeah, and I mean we're talking about what is it, 60% money line. I'm surprised he's not bet a little bit more because of that public love and how we know he's a grappler now. But I talked about the guy above him, Brian Battle. This is an interesting fight to me because AJ Fletcher scores a lot of points but doesn't win fights, like I said. And now we have Brian Battle, who I guess people are going to say, oh, he can't stop the takedown, but he's been fighting the elite guy in Fakhretdinov. That's going to inflate the numbers. Brian Battle seems to be evolving fight to fight. He's got power now in his back pocket. All these random things that add up into his favor. And he's got Fletcher, who I don't really necessarily think is, elite of elite. He's just been lucky to get some takedowns and then go to a decision. That's really what it came down to. He could have been finished in some of these fights.
Yeah, so I'm over the field on Battle. and under the field on Fletcher. So I think Fletcher's going to get some popularity. I think he's got some good like box score, game log kind of numbers for his price. So I think people are going to go there, and I think there might be some leverage on Battle.
That's what I agree, and it's probably pretty damn good first round equity after last fight. This guy came to bang and absolutely destroyed the slate. If you remember, 126 points, quick win.
Yeah, I guess Gabe Green. Yeah, so hopefully does that again. But the takedowns are concerned because like AJ Fletcher then is a scary guy to be under the field on, because if he can get Battle down, then then he could be racking up some points. So.
And it stalls out all that equity for Battle as well. I think we, pretty much close this show out with everybody's favorite fight of the entire night. Muhammad Usman versus Jake Collier, man. I mean, this is as ugly gets, but it is so important for the context of the slate because I feel like there's, dare I say, 3 potential outcomes. Collier wins a decision because he's got a ton of volume. Collier somehow finishes him. There's a finish from either side, or Usman's just so much younger, so quicker that he takes Collier down and then scores a ton of points. That's why I'm scared as hell out of this fight. There's multiple ways this fight scores a ton of points, and everybody's split on it. Like if you look at MMA Twitter, fantasy Twitter for UFC this week, everybody's split. People are saying, I'm going with Jake Collier. He's got the volume.
Yeah, I'm a little over the field on Collier and under the field on Usman, and that's a flip from the beginning of the week because Collier's looked really out of shape. I think he's gone up in weight a lot, but he looked a little bit more trim this time. I think he was down maybe like 10 pounds or so, and so maybe that's just an indication he's taking things a little bit more seriously. And he's higher volume than you would expect for a heavyweight. So normally, big out of shape heavyweights, would normally not be a guy that I wouldn't want unless he can get a first round finish. But yeah, if Collier can put up some volume here, then I have some interest in it. Like I have more interest in the savings with Collier than I do with hoping that Usman pulls out the win here. But I own them both about 25%. I think like my 150 build.
I mean, is the narrative Usman last name go for the takedowns? I mean, it seems to be an Achilles heel for Mr. Collier, but 2 takedowns, and it's not even like they were pretty against Taffa, if you remember that fight, and he only scored 80 points.
Yeah, but these guys are in the mid range, so neither one of them has to do that much. Like they don't need necessarily 120 points on this card to land in the winning lineup. Especially sitting in the mid range. So I think I'm a little under the field on Usman, a little bit over the field on Collier, but it's a tough fight to handicap. I like Collier a little bit more, having seen him shown up on the scales in shape.
You know what's a little bit more difficult? Rangers fan in the YouTube chat says thoughts on Tim Means fight. I mean, Andre Fialho and Tim Means is one of the ugliest knockout. I bet you the knockout prop is juiced to the gills because you got a guy in Tim Means that is long in the tooth, is there for the taking to get knocked out. And then you have Fialho who, man, this guy looks so good sometimes and then just gets clobbered when he's coming forward. So I could see a lot of different outcomes. I like Tim Means and it's scary, man. It's terrifying. It's probably the price is everything. 7,300, maybe a few more tools, maybe a little bit of wrestling if you were to go that route. But it's like Fialho slows down the deeper the fight goes. Tim Means, I can see this thing going 3 and they have hands on the hips and they're like, all right, you throw a punch. No, you throw a punch. So yeah. I feel like it's a really fine line between finish equity and non-fantasy relevant.
Right, it is. And I think that the concern with Means is age. I think Fialho has the highest round 1 finish odds on the slate. So you've got to have some of them if you're doing a multi-entry. I like him even my small field. He's got about 29% chance for first round finish. If that happens on this card, he's almost certainly in the winning lineup. So I've got a lot of this fights in my smaller single entry type builds. I I do think I'm actually over the field on means because it doesn't take that much at like 14% or whatever. Because yeah, obviously like Fialho can also get knocked out. So, but it's a fight. This probably has like the broadest range of outcomes right on the slate. Because you could definitely see a first round finish here. You could also see two guys that are just exhausted in the third round.
Fialho has the best first round equity, you said, and it makes sense because Tim Means is so old. But I think, the deeper the fight goes, the more equity it swings to Tim Means. And God, it's terrifying to say that. It truly is on this. It's just because the fight card is so small. So, I feel like if you want to take the chalky side of Fialho, you're signing up for the best equity in that first round. And if it gets past that, hey, you got beat. It's okay. Move on.
Yeah. I'll say I've got more Tim Means than Bryce Mitchell, and I've got more Fialho than Tim Means.
Makes a lot of sense. You know what we have not talked about is the main event of the evening. And this is the trickiest damn main event from a fantasy standpoint. We've had a hell of a lot of fights we've talked about through the years, and I feel like GAMROT versus FIZIEV is like, I could see this thing bust. I could see GAMROT put 1,000,000 points over 5 rounds, but I am terrified. We both tag GAMROT. Let's start there. I like GAMROT. He's got so many tools. He's got that hold on to your limb. He's got the second, third, fourth takedown type, right? If he doesn't get it, he continues for another limb, tries to rip you down. So it's fantastic for scoring purposes. But I've been up all week saying he's going to shoot a sloppy takedown. FIZIEV's going to hit a flying knee and knock him out. And if that happens, I feel like 45% were showing ownership for FIZIEV. I think that's lower. If you look at lineup builds, it's a little bit more difficult to get to him. If you have GAMROT at 7,700, you're able to do anything you want really with your lineups once you get another piece in there. So how are you handling it? Because I know for fantasy the play is GAMROT. FIZIEV's equity after the first and second round, I can't see him hitting optimal fourth, fifth, and or a decision. A decision's probably ugly.
Right. So that's my concern. So my take on this fight is simply I don't know who's going to win. It's basically a coin toss, but I've got more GAMROT than I do FIZIEV because like GAMROT's going to score so much better in his wins. Whereas like for a 5-round fight, like a 4th round knockout, like a 4th round low paced knockout is a disaster. And that's what I could see happening. But I think GAMROT will score much better in a win, and he's cheaper. So that's I think it makes sense to be over the ownership number we've got there at 37%. And lower. I'm lower on FIZIEV.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at this thing to go to a decision, it's just dead heat pick 'em. Like they don't even know if there's going to be a finish or not, and it's pretty clear that GAMROT will probably just want to ride it out if he gets top position. I don't know if he's going to like style on him from top position, but it's pretty clear that FIZIEV, like he goes in there to kill you. Like that's the scary part of this whole thing.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. Like, yeah, 4th round knockout is a disaster, but FIZIEV is getting a 1st round knockout. Like you said, the flying knee. Like, if you can tell me what round that will happen, I would really appreciate it because it's going to make a big difference. Yeah, generally over the field on GAMROT.
No, 100%. I agree. And I think we kind of nailed the slate. It is very, very tricky. And I started the show with the 2 ugly women's MMA fights. And man, that's going to be the deciding factor. I honest to God think it is. It's terrifying. But, Rendon is somewhat of an unknown, right? And then we have these Vidal. People are going to buy into her first round type of knockout equity. So would you agree that one of these ladies is probably going to do something and we're just going to scratch our heads at low ownership?
We'll see. I mean, sometimes a spade is a spade, right? Sometimes a low paced women's fight is going to end up being a low paced women's fight. But it's the fear is that I'm underweight on these girls, and one of them could because it's a pretty broad range of outcomes. We don't know what's going to happen. Like these fighters are pretty unknown. So yeah,
I like the showdown and the captain type slates for this card. I don't know about you, but I thought there was many more builds that you were able to make. You were avoiding some of these early fights on it. So I don't know if you ever dabble in that, but I thought there were some fun builds you could do with that slate.
That is actually a great call because that actually removes these maybe less appealing fights off the slate entirely. I'd actually forgotten about that, and that they because they chop off some of the prelims on those captain mode
It
showdowns.
makes
So
the
yeah,
card a
that's a great.
lot more fun. I'll tell you that. A lot more fun and enjoyable if you chop those two off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you get the salary multiplier there. So yeah.
Finally, a week off, Squirrel, after this. It's incredible. We've had a long run, and then it's like we're just going after a long run until Christmas pretty much after that.
Yeah, but I think that we got a number of the UFC pay-per-view events coming up, so that should be fun. And John Jones coming back in Madison Square Garden. That's going to be an event in November. So yeah, should be some good slates coming up.
Yep, we come back October 7th with Bobby Green and Grant Dawson. That one snuck up on me. I didn't necessarily think we'd be seeing Bobby Green in another main event, but we do. We're here trying to put Grant Dawson over. But for producer Devin, for John, myself, we will see you guys in a couple weeks.